Example 12 asks us to solve an equation involving a square root and normal terms. What I want you to understand is that if we have one term squared makes one term. Two terms squared makes at least 3, maybe 4 terms. Okay? So keep this in mind. So if what we want to try to do here is we want to try to isolate our square roots on one side and everything else on the other. It's going to make things way simpler for us. So if we have the square root of x plus 7 equaling to x plus 1, we're going to square both sides. And so it's very important that you see that we square the entirety of the other side. This allows us to get our variable out of a square root, but everything else has to be dealt with the same way. If we squared a square root, so like the square root of x plus 7 squared makes x plus 7. It's that simple. But x plus 1 squared is not that simple, right? We have to think of it as foiling it. So we get x squared plus 2x plus 1. Now, I know I just said that we got 4 terms from that. Technically, we get x squared plus x plus 1. I just simplified them to make 2. So that's something that does happen. Now, at this point, we have a quadratic equation. We just have to set it up like one. So we need to move everything to one side. We need to get 0 on the other. So if I take x and the 7 away, I'm going to be left with 0 over here. I get x squared. Now, 2x minus an x, because I'm moving it over, it makes a positive x. And if I move the 7 over, I'm going to get negative 6. So I have this value here. Now I can factor. So x squared plus x minus 6, I can factor as, I can move it x here, x here. So my goal is 2 numbers that multiply to make 1, add to make 1 that multiply to make negative 6. That would be a positive 3 and a negative 2. So from here I can see that x is going to be negative 3 and x is going to be 2. Now at this point you may think that we're done. But what we have to do is we have to check to make sure that these numbers make sense in our original equation. If we move back up to the top, if we had x to equal negative 3 and 2, we look back here. So if we plugged in negative 3, we get the square root of negative 3 plus 7, which is 4. So we get the square root of 4 equals negative 2. Well, that is clearly not right. This happens with square roots. We've manipulated the equation to find solutions, but we created a quadratic that actually has to have 2 solutions. So one of our solutions in this case is not going to work. This one doesn't work. Our negative 3 is not going to work. If we plugged in 2, we get the square root of 9 equals 3. Now that works. So we're going to end up with x equals 2. So when you're manipulating equations, you always have to go back to the original and think, does this make sense? Even though we got 2 answers by our manipulation, it doesn't mean that they both work. One of them actually didn't work. It made a false statement going back to the original. So always be sure to check back with the original to make sure if it makes any sense or not, because when we deal with original functions, we have to deal with their original domain. We can't just go with what we've manipulated to.